Welcome to Higher Learning. I am your host, Oz Rashid. We have another very special guest today, good friend of mine, Jenn Crenshaw, Chief Human Resources Officer with Prospero Health. How are you, Jenn?
I'm fantastic. Happy belated Thanksgiving. It's
Happy
great
belated Thanksgiving. Did you have a good holiday?
I did. Yeah, absolutely. Hung out with friends, ate a lot of food, cooked, shopped. Yeah, did all the things you do.
Does your family make a big deal about Thanksgiving? My family was crazy about Thanksgiving.
No, Thanksgiving and Easter are kind of the same, it's like the spring version of the fall version, but it's relatively interchangeable. But we do, we spend Thanksgiving with friends. So I actually didn't go home for Thanksgiving. I hung out with friends in North Carolina and it was phenomenal.
That's fantastic. Good. I'm so glad to hear that. So listen, we have a lot to talk about today, but I want to start, I'm always very interested in people's journeys, right? And you've had some really great experience. You've worked in really large companies. You've worked in startups. You've done a lot throughout your career, but you've taken a pivot to healthcare over the last decade or so. And so I'm really interested in that. I know you started your career, or at least you were at Burger King for a long time down here in Miami before you went over to Anthem, one of the biggest conglomerates in the healthcare and insurance space. So I'm just interested, what drew you to that role and opportunity? And what did you learn when you got there that maybe was different than other industries you'd worked in the past?
Yeah. So Anthem was not the first time that I got into healthcare. So I actually did start my very first HR job was as a recruiter in home health and hospice.
Oh, wow.
So I started out hiring nurses for home visits back in 1995. And then also worked for an assisted living company later in the 90s. And then for a boutique insurance company where we had Blue Cross Blue Shield as a client in the early 2000s. So I spent had a couple of different stints in healthcare before going to Burger King, and then ended up back at Anthem. And in part, got the phone call to go to Anthem because my healthcare experience. I actually had more experience in healthcare than the CHRO at Anthem of that time.
Wow. So I know you pretty well. I'm going to have to fire my research team. I am my research team. So I don't know that I even knew that. I didn't know that you started recruiting in healthcare. So then what was like, let's ask the reverse then. What was it like going to Burger King, which is obviously in the QSR space, very different than healthcare? What was that kind of adjustment like in terms of taking your career in that direction?
I actually was really excited about the Burger King opportunity because I had just a bit previously in my career spent 5 years with Domino's Pizza. And so I loved my job at Domino's Pizza. That was my first experience in multi-unit. I'd grown up working in the restaurant business, grew up waiting tables, serving. And so it was a little like when I made the transition into Domino's Pizza out of healthcare, that was a bit of an existential moment for me. Like I do recall having a bit of a meltdown alone in my tiny little apartment going, oh my God, I'm going from taking care of people with dementia to pizza. Right. And so but then once I made the decision to join Burger King, I'd already kind of had that existential crisis. Right.
Crossed the Rubicon already. Yep.
What I knew at that point really was that it's the service industry. Right. So what do I love about healthcare? What did I love about food service? Honestly, it's people serving people. Right. And so, what we talk about at Prospero is really, being the employer of choice for people with a passion for service. And I can really say that's really a core element for me. Like, no matter what I do next, there's gonna be that people serving people element to it, because that's really what fires me up.
What a fantastic analogy. I have never heard that before. That makes total sense to me. I do want to dive a little bit into that because I grew up in the service industry myself. I did a lot of waiting at tables. And it's funny because things will happen in my role now as an entrepreneur and CEO of MSH that I'll look back on and I'll realize they're lessons from my time waiting tables, right? Whether it be customer focus or how you deal with people or situations. So I'm interested, since you spent so much time in the service industry prior to getting into healthcare. Do you look back on any of the lessons from waiting tables that have kind of informed who you are as a CHRO in your career going forward?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things that pops out to me immediately when you ask me that question, when I waited tables for cash, right? Like I had a rule for myself that was very different than my colleagues around me. Mm-hmm. I did not count my tips until the end of the shift.
Ooh, I love that.
I never stopped to determine how I was doing along the way. And I made that decision very early on. But my very first serving job when I was 16 years old in a steakhouse, right? I watched my much older peers, much more experienced peers. I watched their attitude be determined by how their cash was tracking for the night.
Ooh.
And I intuitively knew very early, if you have a bad attitude, and if you judge the next table by how the last table treated you, you're just going to spiral in that you're not going to make good tips for the rest of the night because now you're in a bad place. So I didn't want to be in a bad place, right? So I stayed present with just the look, I'm going to make what I'm going to make, and it's all going to average out, and somebody's going to stiff me, and somebody's going to tip me incredibly well. And at the end of the night, the number is going to be what the number is. And, I think that
we've never talked about this. I got to tell you, it's so funny. What a mature mindset during a time. But I also had a similar mindset. Mine was a little bit different. So I also worked at restaurants. And like you said, there's always people bitching about their tips. And I didn't get this. And there's always this sense of entitlement with me with what I saw. And my expectation was this. People don't have to give you anything. Like they can literally leave you $0. So anything you get, right, you should be excited and grateful for, and you should work for it, right? And so I never had this mentality of like, I better be getting 15%, I better be getting 20%. I had this mentality of like, I'm going to earn every dollar I get. I'm going to give a great experience, and I'm going to stand out. And you know what? I got more $100 tips than any of my peers. I had more regulars coming back to me because to your point, I didn't look at it as something that was earned to me unless I worked for it and got it. And it's kind of similar to what you're saying in that you won't let that kind of mindset ruin your day, because ultimately it's counterproductive to what your ultimate goal is, which is to make good money off of tips, but you're just counting it later. I love that.
Yeah.
Another thing that I learned in a restaurant.
Tables.
Another thing I learned in a restaurant, that I want to make this a restaurant podcast, but I remember I had a manager tell me once, Oz, you have these 4 tables right here. Okay. You're a franchise owner. I'm going to provide the food. I'm going to provide the menu and the marketing for you. But whatever experience these customers have within this 4-table section, that's on you as the franchise owner. And man, did I take that mentality. In fact, I tell that to our employees at MSH. We're going to provide a lot of things for you here at MSH, but your customers and your interactions with your customers and your candidates, that's your franchise opportunity. You are going to make or break how that goes. So I love that.
That's the exact link back to what we were saying, right? That's the people serving people, right? We can make that. So yes, in your little 4-table franchise, right? In that restaurant, it's, the accounts that your folks have at MSH. It's the patients that our advanced practice clinicians have at Prospero, right? Like there's a lot that we can provide, but at the end of the day, right? Or, even the market that our clinical directors are responsible for, right? I mean, there's a lot that is provided to them, but at the end of the day, and when we talk about culture and building culture, I say all the time, it's one interaction at a time. And, it's how I consider table, I was just thinking like, what was my, all those years that I waited tables in all those different restaurants, and I got job opportunities oftentimes out of meeting people, tables that I waited on. And I remember there was one couple that would come in to Mom's Diner that I worked at. I know, right? So I worked at Mom's Diner, and this couple would come in, and the wife said, you need to talk to her about the job. I'm not doing it anymore. You need to talk to her. I was like, well, I don't know what's happening here, right? And so he ran a DJ business.
Oh, man.
And she had been traveling with him and working as his assistant, doing all these weddings. And she was done. She didn't want to go do any more weddings with him. And so she was encouraging him to hire somebody to help him out to do weddings. And I got the job because she liked me, because I did a good job serving them when they came into the restaurant.
That's incredible. 2 lessons here. You're always interviewing. whether you think you are or not.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
And
Yes.
going and finding people who work at restaurants and take a different approach is a great way to find high potential future leaders. I think that's the
Absolutely.
lessons we can take away. I
Yes.
love that. So you helped build Prospero Health from the ground up. Prospero is focused on palliative care and treating elderly patients in a way that really goes beyond just standard treatment. So I'd like to know, did this mission resonate with you right away? Why is this important to you? And is that something that formed over time working for Prospero Health, or right away did that kind of grab you by the collar and really bring you in?
Always right away, right? I mean, I mentioned that I've worked for a couple of different healthcare companies in the past. And when I worked in assisted living in the late 90s, I worked for a company that at the time it was called Altera. It's now a part of Brookdale. And we were early groundbreakers in assisted living, right? Like memory care and assisted living, like really like showing families that it didn't have to be a skilled nursing facility for their loved one who didn't need medical care, but needed memory care, right? And so we're on the cutting edge of that. And so I kind of like very early on, I am at my core an innovator, a disruptor. I'm very much attracted to any opportunity to do it differently, turn it on its head, think about ways to improve something. And so, you know, the opportunity at Prospero to improve the way healthcare is delivered, to empower those folks with serious illness, to not have the Prospero patients who are experiencing serious illness, to not have them be the healthcare system. It's a machine, right? And you get
push you in, push you out, get you the treatment, get out of here type of thing.
There's lots of good reasons for those processes, right? There's, you know, I certainly understand when you're in a hospital setting, when you're, you know, there are lots of really good reasons to have strong processes and to not have variance in those processes. And the whole healthcare system built around JACO and all of the different, credentialing and certification processes that those hospitals go through is all about driving out variance. And I understand why, but if I am a 75-year-old with end-stage renal disease and I only have a few years left, right? The last thing I want is to kind of be sucked through this healthcare system where, you know, variance is the enemy, right? And variance is being stamped out to the extent that I don't have choices.
Right.
And so what Prospero does and what I was absolutely attracted to is, you know, we empower these folks to make their own decisions, to live their best life now. And, you know, it gives them an opportunity to work one-on-one with, you know, highly qualified advanced practice clinicians and doctors to say, you know, this is what I want or this is what I don't want. And a lot of that is, you know, also comes from like the traditional hospitals and the traditional healthcare system doesn't always have the time for education. I think, and I don't know if this stat is still true, but 3 years ago when we were launching Prospero, I think there was a stat out there that said, when you go to see your primary care physician, the maximum amount of time that doctor spends with you is 8 minutes.
Oh my gosh. How much time do you spend in the waiting room? Because I know that's really long.
Yeah, a lot more than 8 minutes, yep. Right? So, you know, at Prospero, that doctor or that nurse practitioner comes to your house and they're with you for 60 minutes. They're with you for 90 minutes, you know, and it's in your setting. And it's an opportunity, they get to know you and what matters to you, and they get to see your pictures and they get to meet your dog. And, you know, like it's a totally different experience.
Yeah. I mean, the way I look at it is that there's so many different things now in life that are on demand, right? Amazon ships everything to our house. DoorDash brings food to your house, right? Healthcare is so much about comfort and being in an environment where you feel comfortable and having people around you that you feel comfortable with. And so bringing it into the home has always made a ton of sense. It's just made now that we have a company like Prospero that's able to do it and not just focus on the treatment, but focus on the whole human. And I think that's such an important aspect of what you all do over there, is that it's not just about, hey, we need to make sure that we give a diagnosis and we give the medications. Like you said, it's about learning about that whole person and treating them like a whole person. And that's how healthcare should be. And I'm so glad that we've made humongous steps in that direction, but that's not the way it's been in the past.
No, look, and there's still a long way to go, right? And look, like every clinician who works in those more traditional settings, I know they care just as deeply as the folks that come to work at Prospero, right? So I know that it's not the individual clinicians. It really, it's the system, and it's the fact that we really need to rethink, how healthcare is delivered. And I was always impacted by this vision, right, of like, so, you've got your, Aunt Pearl who is, knows that she has a doctor's appointment tomorrow, right? So she gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning to be ready for a 10 a.m. doctor's appointment because she wants to make sure that, that she has every hair in place, right? She spends the time to get dressed, put her makeup on, go be present for that doctor in a way like everything's fine. Yep. I'm great, doc, right? And, that's another difference, right? In home-based medical care, right? In home-based medical care, we come to see you and we have an opportunity to see, right? Like, and I always talk about, this big basket of medication sitting on the dining room table, right? And now the doctor or the nurse can say, hey, can you tell me about all these meds? Right? And learn from the family member or the patient themselves, right? Oh, I don't take any of those. I don't know what to do with those, right? And that, it's again, the stats, it is amazing that, oftentimes, like right off the bat, like our folks can discharge like up to 5 medications immediately.
Oh, wow.
5 medications that somebody's taking that they no longer need to be taking.
That's better for patients. That's better for their health. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So Prospero has been around for over 3 years now. I know the company had rapid growth. I think you grew from 0 to over 1,000 employees in that time, correct?
Yeah. 0 to over 1,000 in 30 months.
30 months. That is incredible. So I'm interested, where do things sit with Prospero now?
So we had an amazing opportunity to be integrated into Optum. And so Optum is a United Health Group company.
Yep.
And Optum owns many healthcare providers, physician practices, a lot of different companies. And so they actually acquired Landmark Health, who's very similar to Prospero. And so with the acquisition of Landmark Health, Optum also integrated Prospero in. And so we are now actively unifying with Landmark. And so the Prospero team and the Landmark team over the first 6 months of 2023 will be integrating in market by market. And so we'll go from, don't have all the numbers memorized. So Prospero is active in 29 states today. Mm-hmm. Once we unify the two, there is some overlap in a few states, not a lot, but some overlap. We'll be in 40 states total and continuing to grow.
I love that. And I give Prospero a lot of credit, but also I give Optum a lot of credit because that machine we were talking about earlier, when you're United Health Group and you're one of the biggest healthcare organizations in the world, you're going to fall victim to that machine. And you bring in a company like Prospero, you bring in a Landmark, and you're giving credence to that nimbleness being an advantage, right? And so hopefully we can take the great resources that come from an Optum and some of the innovation and nimbleness that have come from Prospero and combine those and get the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Look, I've having worked with a couple of different companies, I can tell you, I do think that this is something that Optum and United Health Group have figured out in a way that many other companies haven't, right? How do you acquire smaller, innovative companies and not destroy the value that you bought? Right. And, we all know there's, many white papers out there about, how does that happen in M&A transactions? How do you make sure that you don't destroy the value when you integrate it in? And I do think that Optum does a really great job of that. And so I'm certainly excited to watch the home-based medical care growth that I know Optum will have under the Landmark brand.
Okay, fantastic. And we're going to talk a little bit more about integration in a little bit, but I want to ask you, you've been in large enterprise companies. You've been in small and medium sized companies. You worked at Mom's Diner. You worked at a startup. What fits you best? What environment, what size environment, what type of environment fits Jenn Crenshaw best?
You know, it's less about the exact size, really, and it's more about my ability to innovate, create, problem solve. Look, I can be in a really large company as long as, there's still an appetite for innovation, disruption, creativity. And so, now I think there are a lot of really large companies that struggle with that, right? And it's also that it's like what we were saying about the traditional healthcare systems, right? They're machines and it's process driven. And so, I think for me, that's really the sweet spot. It's like, I love the resources available from, larger enterprises. One of the things that I was really excited about for the Prospero team when we did integrate into Optum is that, for 3 years, the Prospero team we didn't have a lot of the leadership development resources that our team really deserved and needed to continue growth. And so that was next up on my list, right? That was the thing that from a CHRO perspective, I really needed to give our leaders additional leadership development support than what we were able to give them in the first 3 years. Day one, immediately upon integration with Optum, they had, there's an unending library available to them for, diversity, equity, inclusion, leadership development, right? Like it's just all at their fingertips. It's literally just anything that they have the time for, all they have to do is reach out for it. And so, I love that. I love the resources of a large enterprise, right? It's very exciting to know that that's available to your people. As long as there's still that ability to innovate, problem solve, be creative, as long as it's a company that doesn't kind of get in its own way as, oh, we've tried that, don't try that, right? Or we don't do it that way, right? That's not the way we do it here. Those are companies that I have a harder time.
You don't want to work at. What a great answer. Fantastic. And that totally makes sense. So listen, this is a podcast about hiring. I know that you've been involved with thousands of hires throughout your career. I think you and I have worked together on a few of those. And so I want to learn a little bit more about I know you're great at hiring. What makes you so great at hiring? What some of your philosophies are. So let's start here. If you had to kind of tell us a overall overarching hiring philosophy you have, let's say for your team, right? It could be for your organization, but let's say for your team, what is the most important thing to you? What stands out to you when I say that?
There's probably 3 things that I'm looking for, a blend of 3 things: confidence, humility, work ethic.
Okay, good. So let's talk about how do you identify those in an interview? All right, confidence, I think I can pick up on that. What humility and work ethic? What kind of questions are you asking to try to determine that in a person?
I'm really looking for, I ask a lot of questions around when you've encountered barriers and how did you work through those barriers? How did you get around them, right? Did you break through them, climb over them, go under them, right? Like I want to know, I spend a lot of time asking questions around, not so much that, tell me a time when. I probably do ask a tell me a time when here and there. But I really want to dig in. It's funny because one of the things that I require in interview answers is that I make people give me set the scene. Like I want to know who was there. I want to know when it was, right? Why? Because anybody can make up an answer, right? They're like Google right now, right? There's probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of how to get through an interview books that have been written, right?
Sure.
And most of them are going to say, here's how you, construct an answer to those behavioral interview questions. Tell me a time when, right? So it's really just having a conversation, right? Like not making it feel so structured interview guidey, and just, having a conversation with somebody and finding out what's honestly not so different than some of the questions you're asking me now.
Sure. This is an interview, isn't it?
An interview.
I got two follow-ups. So one is
Yeah.
there's a thin line between confidence and arrogance. And obviously the opposite of that is humility and being humble,
Yeah.
right? Do you see it being kind of like a kinetic energy thing? Like if somebody is like super confident and then they got a little bit of humbleness, okay, like how do you see that work? Or do they have to have both at kind of an equal super level for you to want to work with them? Because most of the people I know dip one way or the other, right? They're either super humble or they're super confident. Now, there's those people that have that quiet confidence about them, that have that humility about them, but you can tell that they feel good about what
I'm equally confident and humble.
I agree. That's exactly something somebody humble and confident would say, isn't it?
Right? Exactly. Yeah. If I had to pick between the two, yeah. I mean, look,
It's tough, huh?
I'd pick confidence.
Oh, I like that. Okay.
Yeah, because you know what? So why, right? Like I'll often say, I'd rather have to hold you back than to have to kick you forward.
I say it all the time. I'd rather have to say sick 'em than hold up.
Yeah.
Oh no, other way around. I'd rather have to say hold up than sick 'em.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Right. Like I mean, I can help you fix, if you were overconfident and we got to pick up the pieces a little bit.
Yep.
Right. I think it like an abundance of humility that results in fear or like an unwillingness. And I guess that's, I think about, like when I was a kid learning about, Moses and how Moses was meek in his leadership style and how meekness was not weakness.
Mm.
And, so I think the same about humility, right? Like I'm looking for humility, but that doesn't mean that I'm looking for scared or tentative.
True. Those things are not mutually exclusive, right? You can definitely have that drive and that hunger and still be humble about you. In fact, some of the best people I know have that. So totally agree with you on that. So a lot of people are looking for work ethics. I know a lot of our listeners want to hear, well, how do I determine that? Like everyone's going to tell me, oh, I work my butt off. I work 80 hours a week. How in an interview are you able to determine that? Are you able to do an interview or do you have to go through other channels to kind of determine what you think someone's work ethic is before hiring them?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can determine a little bit from a series of interviews, not necessarily from a single interview, right?
Okay.
But I think a series of interviews, multiple people, I think you can get to work ethic a little bit by listening for word choice, right? And you can kind of get to the truth of where, I'm talking about, I say I work a lot of hours versus I actually can talk about the outputs of my work.
Yep.
Right. Because I don't necessarily see work ethic as like somebody who's, always putting in a 90-hour work week. Right. I don't need you to put in a 90-hour work week. Right. Like I'm work ethic is all like work hard, play hard. Right. Like, I don't need you to put in crazy amounts of hours, but I need you to be willing to do the work required to get the outcomes we've agreed to.
Totally.
Right. So I think in those conversations, right. And in, like reference checks and talking to people who know this person, have worked with this person in the past, to me, judging that work ethic is more around, being trustworthy, delivering on commitments. If I say I'm going to do something, I actually do it. Right. Being willing to pitch in and help other people.
Yep.
Right. It's not always about you and your outcomes. Right. But it's like, you've finished, but your coworker hasn't finished. And so you have enough work ethic to say, hey, give me a little bit of that. I can help you. Those are the kinds of things I'd be looking for.
Yeah, I love that. Said another way, self-motivated, right? Somebody who's got their own kind of starter inside that keeps them going. I love my acronyms. One thing I like to throw out there, I asked, do they have an AFI? Do they have a fire inside? Right. Because I think that's just such a key thing for people that we want to hire. We want to make sure that they're self-motivated. And that doesn't mean that you work 90 hours a week and that you're rise and grind and you're telling everybody how hard you work. It just means that you're motivated to do good, to put good work by your name, to drive through to conclusion, to follow through with what you say. All of those are the key qualities that I think we all think about when we think about great employees. When I ask you to tell me about your most memorable interview ever, whether it be one you were getting interviewed for or you were interviewing somebody, what comes to mind?
So when I think about my most memorable interview, I was interviewing. It was, in fact, when I was the executive director of a 26-bed memory care assisted living. And I was hiring certified nursing assistants or home health aides to work at the assisted living. And we were still in construction phase. So we were working out of a sales office. And this was long enough ago that we were still running ads in the Philadelphia Inquirer in the newspaper. Yep. And so I had an ad running, and I had open interview times. And so at the sales office, and this young lady came in. She was currently working down the street at the nursing home. She was a certified nursing assistant. But she had someone with her, and the person she had with her had her toddler son. And so I had this one young woman with her toddler kind of out in the waiting room, out on the sofas, and then the other one sitting to interview with me. I was not terribly impressed by this very qualified person that I was interviewing. Certified nursing assistant, working at a nursing home currently, but there was just, she was really just looking for more money, shorter commute, right? There was really nothing she could tell me about why she wanted to work with us other than it was closer to her house and she was hoping we paid more, right? But I was watching this other person who was not there for the interview. She was just the ride to the interview.
Okay.
And she was first out on the sidewalk, and I said, "It's hot out here. Come in, come sit inside," right? But she was tuned into what we were talking about. And I could tell that she wanted to know more. And so I walked up and I was talking with her, and I said, "Do you work with Mary at the nursing home?" And she said, "No, I work at the convenience store." And I said, "Okay." She's like, "But, I didn't ever think I wanted to be a CNA, but I want to do the job you're talking about." And so we started talking about it, and I ended up hiring her.
So wait, was this all in front of Mary? Was Mary sitting there like holding the bag?
Yeah.
Whoa.
And I did not hire Mary.
Whoa.
Mary did not get a job. But her friend and her ride got a job.
Whoa.
She ended up becoming my second shift team lead.
Whoa.
And today she's a registered nurse in upstate New York.
Fantastic. And you're still in contact?
Yes.
So you gave her opportunity out of a convenience store?
Yep.
Oh man, I don't know if we're gonna beat that one. That is awesome. Wow, fantastic. Congrats to her. Good job by you.
There's so many stories along the way of just how she is a great example of confident, humble work ethic.
Yeah. And you weren't even talking to her. You were able to kind of see that through cues of just her with the child and being in the periphery vision.
Look, if you can keep a rambunctious 2-year-old quiet during somebody else's interview, kudos to you right there.
That's a good skill. 100%.
I still have pictures.
I don't want to get all mushy, but this is why I love what you and I do. I really her life inextricably changed. There's no conversation about that based on her showing up there, not even knowing that she was interviewing. Again, always interviewing. And getting this job. And now she's a registered nurse up in upstate New York, if only for that chance meeting. Just such a sliding doors thing. And I just think it's so important and so impactful. I love that story. That's amazing.
I have to tell you, I have one other memorable interview.
Tell me, I want to hear.
I was being interviewed. And you may or may not remember this story. I've told it a few times, but I was being interviewed, and it was in a very memorable place. I was sitting in this person's office looking out the window. I happened to be looking out the window at the airplanes taking off and landing at the Miami International Airport.
Okay.
And in this interview, I'm thinking everything's going great. I've gotten to this point in the whole interview process. I'm really excited about this job. And the person says to me, "Why do you want this job? You're overqualified." And I then found myself having to explain why I was willing to take a job that would be a step back. And I just remember saying, "Yeah, okay, we can agree that you're offering me a job that I can probably do in 20 hours a week." but I can do all the other stuff that you need done in the other 20 hours. So I'm a little surprised that you're asking me this question.
Wow.
And first of all, like who said, like I didn't know like who would ask a question like that. And then where did that like bravery come from to answer in that way?
Confidence.
Like I still don't know where that came from.
So let me clarify. So you were saying other responsibilities that are not part of the scope of that job, you were saying you were going to be able to handle in your additional time because you're going to do this job so fast. Wow.
So literally what I said was, look, as I understand it, you're rebuilding this HR team. And so I agree with you. The job that I'm interviewing for, I can do in 20 hours a week. That means I have another 20 hours a week to help you rebuild this HR team.
Yep.
And quite honestly, that's what I did.
Based on some cues, I think that's a mutual friend we both have. That's a great interview. Yes. And that has really set your career up as well. So like you said, it's always these sliding doors moments. It's this confidence. I am thrilled to hear that. Do you have a favorite question that you love to ask prospective hires in your interviews?
You know, really, it is all about finding out what kind of hardships or barriers.
Adversity they've overcome?
Yeah, adversity. Right. Like when, you know, whether it was difficult relationships that you had to navigate or whether it was, you know, a project that exploded and you had to pick up the pieces. Right. Like I want to know it's, you know, and so it's not a very specific question. It's not like exactly the same question I ask every time. It's really dependent on that person, their background and what I'm interviewing for. But it is always going to be around that overcoming adversity or barriers. Yeah.
So really interesting aside here. So when we hire, so we have a Monday morning meeting at MSH every Monday. We have the entire company in it. We give out recognition. We talk about, you know, what's going on organizationally, a bunch of different stuff. Whenever we have a new hire, we put them and through a battery of questions in front of everybody as kind of a, hey, this is how we operate here. Like you're going to be on the spot a little bit and you're going to have to talk about yourself. Hopefully it's a subject you know well. But also so people can get to know them. And that's a really big thing that we do here. Now, I used to ask, and I stopped doing it. I used to ask a bunch of kind of standard questions. And then I would ask, what adversity have you overcome to get here? Now, what I realized was a lot of people in that first moment when they're trying to make an impression or they're in an interview, it catches them off guard because everybody's faced adversity. They're thinking through what is okay for me to share. What should I share? Should I go personal? Should I go professional? And so I've had people gloss over, and I've had some situations where we had people start talking about deaths of parents or different situations like that have come up. And it's been really illuminating and enlightening. Now, I found that it can be a little bit unfair on that first day when you're really just trying to make a good first impression and you're not prepared and expecting that. So I took it off the table and I asked some different questions, but I do use in interviews. Have you found that have you gotten answers like, can't really think of any adversity, or have you seen that people are like, is that a question that you get 100% hit rate on? I guess is my question.
It is, I think though, but it's because I would never just ask, tell me about adversity.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's going to be, you know, it's going to be something a little bit more specific to their background, right? So, you know, I see here that you know, are talking about this specific success that you had when you were working at Burger King, right? Tell me, you know, in getting to that success, right? Tell me about some of the barriers that you had to, you know, overcome, right? So I'm a little more specific around making it work related, right? And like tying it back to something that we've been talking about. So yeah, I mean, I find that it always, you know, now when I say I get a hit rate, it doesn't mean I always get a great answer.
The answer you want, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
But you get an in-depth answer, you're saying, because of the way you frame it.
No, I don't always get an in-depth answer, right? So, I mean, sometimes they don't think that they had any barriers to overcome.
Right. I've seen that before, which always makes me question things. I'm like, so this has been like lollipops and puppy dogs the entire time, or?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, then that's just, in my opinion, that's just not, that lacks humility.
Introspectiveness too, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, like you're unwilling to tell me, right? Because we've all had challenges, right? If you won't tell me about one that you've had, that's because you want me to think that you've got this all covered.
All perfect, right? What's your biggest weakness? I'm too perfect. I'm a perfectionist,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah.
So listen, we've all missed on people that we've hired before, right? Including myself.
Yeah.
When you miss, right? What typically happened, or what do you look back on and say, "Dang, I regret that I didn't ask this or do this"?
Yeah. I can when I've missed. This is embarrassing. This is me. This is me admitting a bit of humility. Honestly, it's probably because I've been dazzled by their ability to mirror. Right? When I've missed, it's because I thought somebody was a lot like me. And they were going to come in with a similar level of confidence, humility, and work ethic to my own.
Sure.
And only to kind of find out, yeah, I got bamboozled. I got dazzled, right? I was a little too much of like, oh yeah, they're just like me. And, either they weren't, or maybe they are. And there was a little too much.
That's not what we needed. And listen, that's a very common bias. Most people make that. I don't know if it's a mistake. I guess my question for you would be, that's not always a good thing though, either, right? Like sometimes like you don't want to hire people, like you're trying to build a team. And if we all have redundant personalities and redundant skill sets, that's the opposite of diversity of experience and thought and things like that. But it's a common thing that I think every hiring manager does. Man, like this person and me, we went to the same school, we did this. There's so much commonality. I just think that that's not always, and I think it's the same thing in relationships too. I don't think you should be looking for a mirror image of yourself all the time. You should things that go together, complement each other, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, that is one of the things that's awesome about being able to start a team, right? Like having had the opportunity to start from scratch, right? Like that's when you really need to, like, you need to know what do I need to fill in the flat sides here?
Yeah.
Right. And so, whether you use, some of the existing assessment tools and things that are out there, whether, you've just been doing this long enough that, like I'm a big fan of listening for word choice. I really do believe that you can understand a lot about people and how they think by, do they talk about how, or do they talk about what? Or do they talk about when, right? Like just, like what part of the story do they focus on, right? What tends to be their bias when they think about an experience that they've had and they retell that story. I think you can really tell a lot about, rounding out the flat sides of the team.
That's fantastic. I love that. That's definitely a big takeaway right there. You and I have talked about candidate experience in the past and why it's important. Is there anything that you do or instruct people that you're working with or interviewing for roles for you that you want as part of a candidate experience? And do you think it's something that's important? And if so, why?
I mean, you know that I think candidate experience is kind important, right? I can honestly say knowing that you agree with me about candidate experience is the reason why MSH was a Prospero partner.
Yep.
I mean, there's no doubt about it, right?
Yeah.
That. And it's been, I mean, you guys proved it out, in our 0 to 1,000 in 30 months, right? Like, just really providing an excellent candidate experience. I would say, I'm looking for what I would always talk about, right, is authenticity and openness, right? And this is something that the MSH team that provided service to Prospero was great about, right? Is that, like, please don't sell, sunshine and puppy dogs, right? Like, there are parts of this job that are going to be really hard, right? Mm-hmm. Don't tell the nurse practitioners that they're not going to have a lot of windshield time in a rural market. We might fill the job,
but you won't have a long-term person.
But you're not going to have a long-term person, and they're not going to, and they're going to
feel bamboozled. They're going to feel, they're not going to feel good, right? That's not the way you start off any relationship. And I think why we train this way and why it's been important in our company is that this is always about fit, right? Yes. There are some companies that we've declined to work with for different reasons, right? But for the most part, we'll take on most companies because if you pay really well, but you work people to the grind, to the bone, there's some people who want that. They just want to get paid well and they want to work hard, right? And so that's okay. You just have to be open and upfront about that, and then find the people that fits, right? So it's less about good or bad company. It's this is what this company is about, and here's kind of the real story about it. Does that fit what you want? And if it does, we got to match. If not, then there's no benefit to anybody to painting pig on a lipstick and making you think it's something it's not, because that's going to make us look bad. That's going to make you feel bad that you made a bad career decision. And then the client's obviously not going to be happy, because we want to have everything to be authentic, to your point.
Right.
I agree with you.
Absolutely.
I think that's such a big key.
Yeah. Yeah, that really is. I mean, and look, I think that's, I mean, you know, you talk about even in starting relationships, right? Like, you know, in friendships and in anything, right? Like you just like, nobody likes to be lied to. Right. Like, you know, most people say like, I just want to have the information I need to make a good decision.
That makes sense. So I'm going to take it away a little bit from the hiring right now. I want to talk about, because your role has kind of changed with the integration that we talked about earlier. Tell us what you're doing now. And then I'm really interested to hear what you're working on right now from that perspective. That's kind of really juicing you, or what you're excited about.
Yeah. So really have been focused. So the first half of the year was really spent on Optum integration, right? So what do we need to do to be ready to have all of the Prospero employees become Optum employees? So all the stuff you got to do to make sure that you get everybody moved over from a payroll, benefits, all the stuff that really matters. It's the back of the house HR stuff. Right? It's the HR ops piece, but really important, because if you don't pay people right and you don't get their benefits right, then, you know, it's table stakes, right? Yeah, it's a problem. And so that was really, you know, the first half of the year. Since August, I've really had the opportunity to really spend all of my time on what we refer to as the people side of change for Project Unity. So I mentioned earlier that we're unifying the Prospero team with the Landmark team to create the new home-based medical care team. And so I'm really have the opportunity to lead the change enablement and the people side of change. And so what does that mean, right? It's making sure that all of our leaders have everything that they need to be in the best position to support change by the ones. Because change happens to individual people, right? So when I talk about change, you know, like being ready for change, like I tell the leaders at Prospero and Landmark all the time, like, I don't have any change fairy dust, right? I can't come in and sprinkle and say, okay, like now this change is going to go well. We have all the answers. Everybody's going to be okay with all the things that are moving around, right? That's not the case. Like, each individual person is going to have their own journey in this change, right? Talk about a change curve, right? Whether you want to talk about, you know, like the levels of acceptance of change, right? And sometimes you might apply, you know, Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, right? To going through change, like, you know, people go through change differently. They accept change differently. Some are like, bring it on, right? Others are like, whoa, this is not what I signed up for. Yep. And so right now, that's really where I'm spending my time, right? It's just thinking through, like, how do we make sure we have great communication strategies? How do we make sure that we give the leaders the kind of development that they need to be ready for, how do they manage resistance, right? We're not like, people are going to resist change. Why? Because people resist change.
100%.
Doesn't matter if it's change that's good for them or change that's bad for them. The first thing is, whoa, I don't want things to change, right? And so, you know, just spending time like really helping our leaders be ready for, you know, where do we get the time to just listen? Yeah. And so that's really what we're doing now, is just really focusing on, you know, just making sure that we go through the change in a way that that is authentic and open, right? We talk about like being like, are we, you know, like, what is my job going to change? Yes, it is. And here's how, right? Not telling people that, you know, oh no, everything's going to be the same, right? Nothing was ever going to be the same.
Nope. No, it's about the communication. And listen, you and I have talked about Integrations are hard. They are complex. They are nuanced. You're bringing two entities together, and to get them to fit together seamlessly, it's not the Brady Bunch, right? It's tough, right? And so one of the biggest aspects that you have to figure out, you have to focus on, is the people aspect. Systems, financials, processes, these are inanimate, right? At the end of the day, you can do a lot of due diligence up front. You can know what you've learned. You can have that game plan. But the people aspect, right? So tough. The change management aspect. And like you said, people have tendency, if you take them out of their comfort zone and their norm, there's going to be a fight or flight type of reaction initially, right? And it's really important that you're just upfront and you communicate what the intention is and what you're trying to do. Because there's a lot of uncertainty at those times, right? When these integrations happen, like it or not, there's a bunch of employees who are thinking, what does this mean for me, right? As you would expect anybody to be.
Absolutely.
So that's why that people aspect makes or breaks these things at the end of the day. So
it really does.
That's exciting work. And it sounds like it's going well. So I'm happy to hear that. I want to ask you and I have talked about books in the past. You and I share book titles a lot. I saw a LinkedIn post. I want to read it to you, and I want to get your thoughts on this book. So rereading Alyssa DeVere's book, Kick-Ass Confidence, Own Your Brain, Up Your Game. Too many great gems for me to share them all here, but this one right now. There can be no happiness if things we believe in are different than the things we do. All right, you got to give us context on that. So why did I say that to you?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, if you've never read Alyssa's books on the neuroscience of confidence, please do, all of you, because it's great stuff. Confidence can absolutely be learned and developed, and there is neuroscience to confidence, and that's really cool. Look, this quote there, there can be no happiness if things that we believe in are different than the things we do. Look, living with integrity is really important, right? Like if you espouse a set of beliefs and values, and then you have to come to work and behave contrary to your own beliefs and values, like you're going to be miserable, right? Like you're going to do things every day that cause you to feel badly about yourself, right? And kind of like going back to that idea of confidence and humility and work ethic all at the same time, right? Like if I'm gonna show up and work really hard and be willing to try things that I've never tried before and potentially fail at some of those things and have to be resilient and get back up, then that requires that I have a level of confidence. And to have that level of confidence, I really I've got to be congruent with myself. Right. And so I can't say that I value authenticity and then be fake. Right. I can't say that I value openness and then keep a bunch of secrets. Right. And so, I was actually just having a conversation earlier today about, the importance of if you can't be your authentic self wherever you are, in personal relationships, in your work relationships, right? Then you got to ask yourself, like, what, how
am I in the right place?
Am I in the right place? Right?
Yeah.
Is what I'm trading for this worth it?
And if you have confidence, the answer is always no.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you know that there'll be another opportunity. There'll be something else there that does fit your authentic self. That's that real confidence, right?
Yeah, that's right. And, in this conversation I was having earlier today, I said, look, because there have been times in my career where I was not as secure, right? Like financially secure, personally secure. And I walked away, right, with the attitude of like, look, I'll work 3 jobs if I have to, right? I've done it before, I can do it again. Better, and I would rather work 3 jobs than stay in this one place where, yes, I might be paid a lot of money, but I'm inauthentic, I'm incongruous. And, that's really what that quote meant.
You are one of the most authentic leaders I know. So you're doing a damn good job at that. I'll leave you with this, or you leave us with this. If you can amplify one bit of advice that maybe you didn't have early on in your career, but that you've learned as you've gone through your career that we can offer up for somebody maybe getting started, what would it be?
Be where you are.
Ooh, tell me more.
So, yep. The one thing, it's you get a job, a position, a promotion, an opportunity, and highly motivated people then start looking for what's next. Or you're talking to somebody and they say, I just need a challenge. I need an opportunity to grow. I'm bored with what I'm doing. I need to do something more. And, look, I've been there, I've said those things, but I can also say, looking back, in every single job you have in a position where right now you might be saying, I need more. I wish that I had more challenges. Look, those challenges are available to you right now. Mm-hmm. Those opportunities are available to you right now. You don't need somebody to give you a different title. You don't need to leave where you are to go do something else in order to grow, have opportunities, and be challenged. Just do more. Just find that opportunity, innovate, disrupt, right? Like, just do it.
Ooh, I think I've heard that somewhere before. I'm not sure if I can picture it.
Yeah,
oh, that's
maybe.
Right, Nike. I love it. Yeah. So listen, you are incredible. As always, I appreciate the conversation. I thank you for taking time and speaking with me. And
thanks for inviting me.
Of course. Great conversation. I'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thanks, Oz.
All right. Bye, Jenn.
See ya.